some handouts just as you come in, if you'd like to grab those. I am showing exactly 10 a.m., so I think we'll start. We have about 96 people on the live stream. I'm going to be referring to this handout, which are highlights from the reopening plan. If you are following this at home, the page numbers will be the same page numbers as the complete handout. If you're watching at home, it's not essential that you follow along with this, but I am going to refer to a few pages. First of all, for those who came in today, thank you very much. There's an excellent social distancing being practiced. I appreciate it. We've come to understand what that term means, and thank you very much for your cooperation. I am going to answer every single question that you have today. I thought I would just start by reviewing the plans because that may answer most of the questions. But feel free at any point that you've had your questions answered. If you need to leave, please leave, but I will stay right until everybody feels like all their answers, they've received the answers that they need. What I will tell you is this is a draft plan that the Board of Ed has approved as a draft, giving the Superintendent of Schools the full authority to make any changes based on parent input, teacher input, staff input, community input, as well as any changes that ultimately get required by the State Department of Education. If you watch the news, things change every single day, every single week. There's a new update that I just got out to you this morning based on information that we got on Tuesday afternoon. So the news keeps evolving, keeps changing. So what these plans represent are three different models of learning. Obviously, the most complex one to prepare for is 100% in-person learning. So that's where our effort is right now. Let me walk you through a few things here. If you turn to page 5, this is not an element of the, and for those of you coming in, we have some handouts just as you come in. On page 5, this is not priorities of the state of Connecticut, but these are our priorities as we move forward this year, regardless of what our learning is. So when I go through the models, to me, all of these aspects apply. And the number one priority certainly is the safety of our students and our staff. Everything we are doing in our schools this summer, with our district reopening committee, with our building reopening committees, each school has their own reopening committee, everything is based on the safety of our students first. And I'll go through it in this packet. It contains some of our safety expectations. Our second expectation is that we develop appropriate educational opportunities. Education is not going to stop. Education is going to look a little different, but our priority still is to provide your children an excellent education. There's options that I'll go through, but we want to make sure for those families that elect to send their children to school that it is a very appropriate educational experience for your kids. The third expectation, and I think this is one of the most important, and I don't mean to place it third on the list because it's less important than the others, but we are very concerned about the social and emotional growth of our students. We know that they are in excellent hands at home, but there's a certain growth and emotional development that students experience at school. And that's tough to do from March through June when the kids are home. And even through the summer, when summer camps, perhaps you're not sending them to summer camps, there's not the big drama program. Usually this auditorium would be booked all summer because we have YIPCA in here with 80 students from the community putting on a giant musical in 6 weeks. And a lot of that just isn't happening. We know there were certain students who thrived. They loved being up in their room, working on their computers and doing school. Other students really struggled with that lack of adult mentorship, contact, and contact with their friends. That's something that we're preparing for, so our students, when they come back to school, regardless of if they had a great experience or if they didn't have a positive experience, we're prepared to deal with that so they feel welcome back into the school. And then the fourth thing is that we want to make sure that all of our students are at grade level by next June. So any gaps that resulted as a result of distance learning, for one reason or another, as we bring students back in, we want our incoming second graders by the end of the year, we want them to be appropriate for, ready for third grade. We want our fourth graders at the end of this year ready for fifth grade. So that's closing any learning gaps that may have happened as a result. So those are our priorities as we're meeting this summer. And it's one of those summers that, usually summer is a nice philosophical time. We develop ambitious goals, we meet with the principals, we're doing cleaning and hiring, of course, and things like that. And usually it's a time when we can say, okay, what are our ambitions for this year? And let's do some professional development for ourselves. This has been a very different summer. It's constant changes, it's constant Zoom meetings with the State Department of Education, with the governor, with the commissioner, and we are learning new things every single day. But regardless of that, I want you to know we're taking our reopening plans very seriously. A lot of effort has gone into these and dissecting these. If you turn to page 7, I'll get into the crux of our plans and what we feel is regardless of what the fall looks like, whether we're fully reopening or partially reopening or we're in distance learning, at some point, we're going to welcome students back into our school, and it could be as early as early September. But the priority, and this is going to be a community effort, to keep our schools open once they are open is everybody's responsibility. So, we're not going to be talking, usually I send out an update that says, hey, September is attendance awareness month. So, we encourage students to start off the year with great attendance in September. Now we're going to ask people, hey, we're not going to push perfect attendance, we're going to push healthy attendance. So if you turn to page 8, between our expectations and the state expectations, this is the real crux of the daily life of students. So first of all, we're on page 8. We are asking our students, to stay home if they are feeling ill. Now, I know that makes sense, and I know it's complicated for families that have to work, but we're relying, if we're going to keep our schools open, that we have to ask anybody who's not feeling well to not even gamble with it, but to stay home. We're asking parents in box number 2 to just do a simple morning health check. We want to prevent transmission. We're going to ask any fever over 100 degrees. Students should not be in school on that day. And then any symptoms. Obviously, the symptoms, if they're coughing, if they don't feel well, or one thing or another. And I know as with young children, sometimes, they're just going to say, I don't feel well today. And you're going to have to discern, do they really not feel well, or are they just tired? But we're asking you to do a morning health check before you send your students to school. The non-negotiable on the State of Connecticut plan is that face masks, face coverings have to be worn the entire day. We're going to develop mask breaks, and I'll talk about those. But the requirement is the mask for all staff and for all students. And I know that's a touchy point for a lot of people, but when the state plans came through, that is the one area where there's no wiggle room on the part of the state. And I'll tell you why. First of all, when the state came out with their summer school plans, they said, these summer school plans, kind of look them over because they're going to resemble what the fall plans are going to look like. And the summer school plans indicated to us 1 student per row on the bus. No more than 10 students in a classroom. And all of us said, 12 to 15 students on a bus isn't going to work. There's just not enough money for us to triple the number of buses. And DACO and the other bus companies said, Forget asking for it. We don't have the buses, nor do we have the drivers. When we talked about classrooms of 10, we said, you know, how can we hire twice as many teachers and find twice as many classrooms? So the governor and the committee got that message and said, okay, you social distance as much as possible. You get rid of the extras in the classroom, you spread out the desks as much as possible. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the requirement now is, if we can't get 6 feet on the bus and exact 6 feet in the classroom, then masks have to be worn by everybody. This is similar to what Massachusetts and Rhode Island are doing. They're not putting a limit on the number of people in the rooms at this point, and that may come, and we'll talk about what that looks like. But for the opening right now, where the governor has said, look, I am hoping for a 100% full in-person school, and if you saw his press conference yesterday, there's even that feeling of, I want to get kids into school for a couple of months, because we don't know what November or December are going to bring. If it's a flu season and we've got symptoms that look like flu and symptoms that are, you know, COVID and flu symptoms are the same, it's going to wreak a little havoc for us. So we're just focused on September right now. But the plan was, and the requirement from the state is that face coverings have to be worn. Now that doesn't mean that kids can't go outside and have what we're calling a mask break. We fully anticipate during recess, if the kids stay 6 feet apart, PE, the teachers are going to find ways to spread them out enough that they can take the mask off, breathe in some fresh oxygen. We fully anticipate, too, that teachers are going to take them outside and do a couple lessons outside. You know, at center school, sit the kids around the gazebo 6 feet apart and do a lesson outside for 15 minutes, then bring them back in. Let them take the masks off. So we're planning mask breaks. The East Hampton Lions Club is renting us their tents. We're going to have tents in each of the school for outdoor lunches, outdoor activities, and anytime students are outdoors and 6 feet apart, we'll consider that a time for a mask break. Social distancing is still required. So when we're in the hallways and when we can maintain 6 feet, 6 feet will still be the expectation. In some of the classrooms, and I'll go into this in detail, what the principals in our facilities department have done is they've already started going through classrooms. Some of those delightful little reading nooks and big bookshelves and extra cozy furniture. Unfortunately, for the start of the year, we are removing all that. We're just keeping the desks and the tables. And if you picture our classrooms, it's going to be difficult to get 6 feet apart. But we are spreading them out as much as possible. And as an added layer of protection for grades K through 5, we're providing these tri-fold plastic shields that are about 18 inches high. They're not huge, they're 18 inches high, about 20 inches wide, and they stand up right on the desk. And that way the students can at least interact with each other, or if the teacher wants to talk to them directly, rather than being 6 feet apart, can step forward with the student. And you know, our elementary teachers actually bend down and speak to student at the level, but they both have a mask and now there's a shield in between them. So we're going to maintain as much social distancing as possible. This one has just become a norm that we're going to have hand sanitizing stations everywhere. Every classroom will be outfitted with a hand sanitizing station. Every time you walk into a building, there'll be hand sanitizing. We're just going to create that culture where students, before they eat, after they eat, when they walk in the building, when they walk into the classroom, they're just sanitizing their hands. And then we're asking to create a cohort on the bus. So, and it's not so much elementary school, but sometimes middle school and high school kids get a bus pass. I'm going to go home with John today instead of on my bus. The bus students are assigned to will be the bus that we expect them to ride. Now I know some students take one bus in the morning and a different bus in the afternoon. We're still going to allow that. What we're also asking parents is we're encouraging parents to drive their children to school, at least for the start of the school day. And we've sent out a survey, and I hope you've responded to the survey. And keep in mind, the survey is completely non-binding. We're going to send it out again in the end of August, once you have 6 more weeks of information from what's going on in the state of Connecticut. But if you are willing to drive your child, you do not give up your seat on the bus. So if you indicate, you know what, I'll drive in the morning, or I'll drive in the afternoon, or I'll drive both times, You don't necessarily give up your seat on the bus, because there's going to be certain days you can't drive, conditions change, we're not rearranging bus stops or bus assignments. Every student who needs to ride the bus will be able to ride the bus. So understand that does make morning drop-off and afternoon pickup a little more complicated. And that's one of the items that our building committees, opening committees, are really addressing at this point. What does drop-off look like? At the high school, it's easy because there's a separate entrance for buses. Parents pull, they get off the front, parents pull into the back. At the Memorial School, with only one entrance and probably 75 drop-off and pickups a day that we anticipate doubling or more, we're going to have to come up with a routine that gets kids into school as little as possible. That information will be coming. But those are the types of things that we're not going to leave those things to chance. We're going to make sure we have answers for those. If you turn the page to page 10, so here's the crux of what the state has asked us to do. They've asked us to develop an in-person learning model with options for families, a hybrid learning model, and a distance learning model. And the models depend on the rate of transmission in Connecticut. Right now, Connecticut has the advantage of being one of 4 states that is actually doing well. Whether we are able to continue that through the summer and into the fall, that's, we're all watching the news to find out exactly what's happening. But obviously, the green, yellow, red, if transmission rates are low in Connecticut, low regionally, then the model is the in-person model. If we're seeing, we've had a few more spikes in Fairfield County, and the governor says, I want you to use your hybrid models, then we go into the hybrid model. And obviously, if we have some sort of surge or just some unknown, we go back to the distance learning model. Everybody understands what that is from last March, April, May, June. Now, we learned a lot of things in distance learning. We went from classroom instruction, and 2 days later we were doing distance learning. And I applaud every teacher who got an email from me and said, by the way, starting tomorrow you'll be doing distance learning. And we were able to pick up with that very quickly. We learned a lot as things went on. And if we do distance learning, things would be slightly different. But that's a topic for another time. You can read through this and see what each one entails. But turn to page 12, because here's the crux of our plans. So let's assume that the governor says, as he has right now, but let's roll it forward 4 or 5 weeks. The governor says, all right, schools, you are going to use your in-person learning model. I want 100% of students attending. Now, if you read the Hartford Courant from his press conference yesterday, that's still his stance. Now, it's July, I've lost what date it is, 17th, thank you. And you just got a note from me, if you check your email in the morning, that we've actually pushed school back to after Labor Day, and I'll explain that in a minute. But let me go through the in-person model. So, the in-person model, traditional schedule. Every student is in the building every day, and obviously all safety expectations are in place. My biggest question from parents is, Mr. Smith, what if a child absolutely refuses to wear a mask? If a child can't wear a mask, if they're having a bad day, if it's just clawing at their face and they're not, we have to send them home. The Board of Ed developed in their policy that students will wear masks as directed by executive order. So right into the building, adults, students, and we are going to enforce that. Now, I know for some kids, it's just, this is tough for all of us. It's tough and it's uncomfortable. I had one parent who said, Paul, I'm really happy that schools are reopening, and I'm going to have my kindergarten student wear a mask an hour a day, and then I'm going to, every time they're on their computer. So if you have young children, and you probably are already, just get them used to wearing the mask a little bit longer than perhaps. And I don't mean to downplay it as, oh, that's really simple. But we don't have the time, and I can't ask my teachers to constantly be reminding the student to put on their mask. So for the protection of all of us, because it is a safety and health issue, the students have to have a mask on. Beside that, our in-person model is going to be your teacher with your child. And we are going to run the schedule as absolute best as we can. Yeah, the desks will be spread out a little more. And, we won't have those comfortable little reading nooks and, morning meeting on the floor with all the teachers, all the students gathered in a circle around the teacher. For the start of the school year, that's going to look a little bit different. But I know that our teachers are going to find a way to welcome your children into their classroom every single day. And the instruction is still going to be superb. So that's what we are planning for right now. There are some parents, and I respect anybody who says, I'm just not sure yet. Either my child won't come into our house. So while we are running this in-person learning, this 100% students in school, families can elect the first option below, what we're calling the remote learning parallel track. We're not calling it distance learning because it's not the distance learning model of the fall. The spring. We're calling it remote learning parallel track. And there's some characteristics to this that we are still fleshing out. For example, the state is developing what they're calling the remote learning hub. It's supposed to have resources for families and teachers ultimately, but it's supposed to be a place where families can go and log in, and there's science programs, social studies programs, reading programs, Khan Academy math, regular math. But we're also going to do our best to supplement that education. You won't have access necessarily to your child's teacher, but you'll have some support from the or a family that asked to have a Chromebook. If you're on the remote learning parallel track, we'll gladly give you a Chromebook, a school Chromebook to use. We'll make sure that you have logins for the iReady instructional seats, if your child found that beneficial. We'll make sure that or in East Hampton, the day you want to send your child back, just call 24 hours in advance so we can make sure that they are all set. But we're not asking you to unregister your child. You're still going to be, your child's still considered in the East Hampton Public Schools. And when you are ready to send them back, whether it's a month after the vaccine or 2 days into school, whenever you're ready to send your child back, we will welcome them back into the schools. In fact, on August 3rd, when we do our mailing home to families, you're going to get your child's teacher's name. So we're still assigning every child to a classroom. Now, we know who is thinking about staying home at this point, because the survey that you've done, I think we have about 1/3, Wednesday we had 1/3 of the responses back. And it doesn't matter who said, I'm thinking remote learning or considering remote learning, we are still assigning every child to a classroom. So don't be alarmed if on August 4th you get that mailing and says, my child's kindergarten teacher is this person. You say, wait, I want remote learning. We're letting you know who your child's teacher is. Just so you know, the teacher knows, you may get emails from the teacher that some of the things we're doing in class in case you want to participate, so that when you go back, your child already knows who's in their class and who your teacher is. Doesn't matter. Whether it's, like I said, a week, a month, after the vaccine, and it can be the entire year if that's your comfort level. The other option is temporary homeschooling. I don't want to do anything that you tell us to do. I didn't like the mask. I don't like the idea of masks, and by the way, I didn't really like distance learning either. I think I can do my own thing. And I completely respect that. So there's no Chromebook, there's no school materials, you're going solo, and that is fine with us. And even though I've said, there could still be some learning gaps, and it doesn't, necessarily keep we're not using the word parallel homeschool that we are trying to do with the remote learning track. Even if you choose that option, you can still send your child back to school any day that you want to send your child back to school. So neither of these options preclude you from saying, Okay, we tried it. He really wants to go back. He's playing recreation soccer with the same kids every night from 5 to 7. Let's just send them back. We will take any child back anytime. So please understand that if you have any concerns, or you just want to see how things are going, then choose the remote learning parallel track or the homeschooling track. If you're confident and you say, you know what, let's see how it works, I'm going to do the in-person learning, great. We'll see you on Tuesday, September 8th. The other option is, if somebody in your house becomes sick, we're asking you to quarantine for 14 days, or your child quarantine for 14 days, then we're going to make sure that you go right on to the parallel learning track for a couple weeks until you come back in. So this, there could be an in-out sort of thing. We're kind of prepared for anything that comes our way. And we're just talking through every possible scenario. Before I take questions on that, let's go to the hybrid model on the next page. So we go into hybrid learning just in case we get this little surge regionally or in Connecticut, or all of a sudden the patterns we're seeing in Florida and Texas, for some reason, end of August, that's where we are again. And the governor said, look, I tried to get everybody back in, but you're going to have to go to your hybrid model. Our model is likely to be the model at the top where it says AA, B days. And what that does is students go to school 2 days in a row, and then they have distance learning. We divide the classes alphabetically. So if you have Meg Ritzak for kindergarten next year, we're going to take her class, we're going to cut it right down the middle. So 10 students go on A days, 10 students go on B days. Now we realize that when we cut classes down the middle, if your last name begins with KLM, it's possible that in the first round, one of your children are an A, one of your children are B. We're going to fix that. So when we look at the lists, all of the children in your family across all of the schools, if we have to go to this model, will either be A or B. So in one class it might be 11 kids, and another day it might be 12. So regardless of last names, regardless of a perfect 50-50 split, we'll make sure that families go on the same day. Now this isn't a great model. It doesn't really help do what some families need. And for those families that need to go back to work, this is not an ideal model. There is a lot of talk in the state, and a lot of people have asked me, don't you think we should start with a hybrid model? Let's just start for 3-4 weeks with half the kids in the building at the time, and let's see how things go. Doesn't really reopen Connecticut, but it is a safer start for students. So we were having that conversation, and in fact, I was a little more concerned with the problem of this model. We talked, maybe we should even skip this model and just go into distance learning if we need to for a time being. But what has been made clear to superintendents through the commissioner, through the State Department of Education attorney, and through the governor is, if the governor says we are doing a full reopening, then schools must use their in-person learning model, because the hybrid would not meet the statutory requirements of 180 days. So right now, we don't have a choice to say, you know what, let's just use the hybrid model. Because right now the plan, and you heard the governor say this yesterday, we're still thinking full reopening. Now, tomorrow, because news changes so quickly, he could say to superintendents, you know what, whatever your hybrid model is, that's where you're going to start until October 1. But until doing that, our plan must be the in-person. I don't have the option of saying, hey, we got to start with distance learning. The only thing that overrides that is if we had cases in our schools, in our town, a surge of 23 new cases, 40 new cases, a couple cases in school. In that case, everything is overridden to our local health director, Russ Melnick from the Chatham Health. Russ and I speak anytime there's a case, and if Russ says, Paul, I think you should shut down for a week, or 2 or 3 days, or close all schools for 2 weeks, that overrides any expectation from the state. So local cases, in-school cases especially, could force us into distance learning for a period of time. But when we are riding with, obviously now, with no one in school, with minimal cases in Connecticut, it is the in-person learning plan. But we are preparing for all options. We're prepared for the in-person learning plan. We are preparing for the hybrid plan, and obviously we are prepared for distance learning if we have to go back to distance learning. Some of the protections, like I said, we're putting in the shields, we're putting in hand sanitizing stations. We are ready for that distance learning. I mean, the in-person learning. If we have to go to the hybrid plan, the safety aspects still apply, though with half the students in the classrooms at a time. We're going to spread them out a little more, but the same expectations for hand sanitizing and cohorting as much as possible is in place. And if we have to shut down, we go to distance learning. Something that we're doing for middle school parents, we used to just do 8th graders through high school having 24/7 access to Chromebooks. We're going to reduce that now to 6th grade. So every 6th, 7th, 8th grader, in addition to the high school, will have their own Chromebook that they keep with them every day and take them home at night. We've also, through the capital money that the town council so graciously provided us with this year, we've purchased these cases that the Chromebook just sits right in the case. It's got a handle. You open it, it stays right in the case. You zip it up, it's got a handle. You're ready to go with it for grades 6, 7, and 8. Also, we're in the process of working with the elementary PTO to buy those same Chromebooks handles for our elementary students who need to take a Chromebook home. So if we were on an AABB schedule and your first grader was in school on Monday and Tuesday afternoon they would bring home a Chromebook. And it's got a nice little handle, it fits right in a pouch. The cord sits right in there, so it's easy transfer back and forth because we would want them to bring it back the next Monday. So we're kind of making preparations all around for each of the scenarios. I used the word cohorting a minute ago. I just want to make sure that you understand what that means. In the plans, and if you've read my plans, I'm so impressed with you. I've only given you like a short sliver of it today. When you have a good cup of coffee, open up the whole thing on PDF and read it. And I'll actually print you out a copy. You can stop in the central office anytime. Come and see us at the new town hall. We'll give you a printed version. But the word cohorting means we're trying to keep the same group of students together and isolated as much as possible. So what that looks like is our 2nd grade classroom, we're going to try to keep those students from, being out in the hall and mixing with other students as much as possible. So for example, when they have music, we're going to have, for the start of the year, we're going to have the music teacher come in. We're going to have the art teacher come into the classroom, rather than moving kids through the hallway all the time at the memorial school. We're going to do the same thing as much as possible at the middle school. It's more complicated at the high school because students elect a lot of different types of courses and choices at the high school. So it's much more complex for us to cohort at the high school. And then recess would be with the same group of students each day, and PE probably would still be outside for as much of the year as possible. But our goal in doing that is just not to have your child mixing with 600 other students, just having them mix with the 20, 25 students that are in that classroom. On page 14, 15, and 16, I'm sorry, page 14 and 15, we talk about how we monitor COVID-19. Because not only does it determine which model the state could have us go, but for our own sake, we want to know if there's surges in East Hampton or anything. Chatham Health District sends me and the town a weekly update on the number of cases, how many people have been tested, how many of those tests have come out positive. And right now East Hampton is looking pretty good, but I get that weekly update. If you look at page 15, here's the important one that people are concerned about. What happens if one of my staff members or one of my children come down with COVID-19. The procedure is, we call the Chatham Health District right away, and Russ Melvin, local health director, is prepared to assist us in any way. Some of the things he'd want to know from the student or from the teacher, were you around anybody outside of the school? Did you catch this from outside of the school, or do we think that the person caught it from in school? If we think they caught it from outside of school, we isolate them as quickly as possible. And maybe we close for 2 or 3 days. If it appears that it's coming from within the school, then that's a longer shutdown. So that's some of the conversation that would go on. But obviously, what we don't want to do is have it spread throughout the schools. There's minimal cases in East Hampton, and that's great. But, it's summer. People are moving around a little bit more. Obviously, we're going to ask families, if you go to California, the week before school starts, then you got to stay out for 14 days. But understand, we don't have a way to enforce that. Connecticut is really trying to enforce that now. But the local school district, we don't have the team or the tracking to find out, okay, these people were in California, why are they back in our buildings? This is why, right at the beginning where it's saying, it's everybody's responsibility to keep our schools open. And I know that our governor is trying to find ways to really make sure that people who come in from out of state, make sure that they quarantine. And that list of 22 states, it may be 10, it may be 32 by the time August comes around. So obviously we are taking very seriously any case in our school, and then the implications of what that would mean. If you turn to page 619, I've just shared with you the health and wellness checklist. So the way I put the plans together, I decided, okay, let's create a checklist for ourselves so that my district reopening committee and every school reopening committee can go through and put a check mark next to every single box here. The boxes also indicate if there's a red star in the box, that is a requirement of the state of Connecticut. And it's obviously one of our requirements. The green star is one of the many recommendations of the state of Connecticut, but we've made that one of our local requirements. And the white box, even though they're not necessarily required by the state of Connecticut or recommended by the state of Connecticut, we've made those our expectations and one of our own local requirements. So I've only given you the health and wellness section that all of our buildings are going through right now. But we also have a checklist for our facilities, our operations, our lunches. We have a checklist for instruction. We have a checklist for social emotional growth. We have a checklist for technology. And we have a checklist for, there was one more. Busing, transportation. So we're taking our time. This is what our building committees are working on, making sure that we can check off all of these boxes. I mentioned lunch quickly. The way we're going to start K through 5 is we're going to deliver lunches to the room. There'll be a hot lunch option and a cold lunch option. They'll be prepackaged. For students that want to purchase lunch, we will be able to do that, delivering lunches directly to the room. It's not ideal. I'd like the kids to go down to the cafeteria and be able to move a little bit, but just to start the year, doesn't preclude them from still having recess, but we decided we're just going to do lunch in the room rather than having them all gather, go through lines. We're just going to simplify it for the start of the school year. Our cafeteria staff is prepared to do those grab-and-go lunches. We're also going to, at the middle school and high school, reduce the number of kids at lunches, spread them out. It's a little easier with the high school because we can say, okay, 100 kids in the cafeteria, let's bring it down to about, well, it's usually about 150, 200 kids in the cafeteria. Let's bring it down to 75. Send some kids out on the patio, send some students out in the back along the gym. There's a nice area to sit out back. So we'll create options for students. It's a little easier high school students than to say to the elementary students, oh, just go find a place for lunch. Someplace nice. So, that's one of our concerns as well, making sure that everything from lunch to the schooling is as much distance as possible and as logical as possible. So at this point, I've talked for about 41 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to questions. You are welcome to come down so we can hear the question. If you prefer to stand and yell out the question, then we can do that as well. Yeah, right over there.
Hi, Megan Gagnon. Just a couple questions. Will parents be expected to send in personal school supplies since there will be no sharing?
Yeah, that's a great point, and we're working on that right now. The community bucket of markers, the math manipulatives, the pail of scissors and chalk and other things like that. What you're probably going to do is get a request from our principals saying, would you be willing to provide the following items that would be used by your child through the year? Because we are going to avoid any sharing of materials. Anybody that could not afford to do that, we would supply those.
And what about, so my child is a high school student, who will be a freshman. What about clubs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're still waiting on guidance from the state on the CIAC athletics. So right now, athletics are allowed to have meetings via Zoom and some training and things like that. What the fall season looks like, we do not know. With our own clubs, I think we probably will wait a couple of weeks. But I don't want to drastically change the high school experience. What we may say is things like Interact Club that has 125 students in it. It may be Interact Club A and Interact Club B, and some of the kids watch the meeting at home, some of the kids attended live. Some of our smaller clubs, as long as they could be done social distancing. But anything after school in the building, if it's a club in the building after school, would still require a mask.
And my last question has more to do with teachers.
Yeah.
What accommodations are being made for teachers who are immunocompromised or have families at home who are immunocompromised?
Sure. So the teachers are eligible for FMLA and protections through the Family Cares Act, and our office is sorting out that any teachers who have concerns.
Will they be allowed the opportunity to teach remotely or not? I mean, how?
Yeah. So we haven't quite determined that yet. We're still waiting to see exactly how many teachers there are, and what we are trying to do is, if we can provide live teachers, that's our first choice. If there's a specialty teacher and I can't get a replacement, then we can do that remotely. But understand, for the kids who are in school, trying to set up a remote connection with that teacher is, could be a challenge. And not necessarily the experience we want them to have. Any other questions? Yes?
I'd rather just stand here if that's okay.
That's okay. I'll repeat your question for the live stream audience.
Okay. So, a lot of people know me. I'm Verticillian. My son is special needs. He's also medically complicated. We've made the decision to keep him home just because of that. However, I am not a good teacher. That was not my occupation. I felt like I was failing him during the distance learning project, even though we were working with teachers and, the special therapists. Is there a way that you or the community can provide perhaps any self-quarantine tutors to help the parents of those kids to reduce the fighting that the parents are dealing with, but also the frustration that the kids are feeling?
So are you talking about people coming to your home?
Yes.
I could not guarantee that, just for the safety issues. If it's possible, we would try to arrange that, but I can't promise anybody that's coming in that I could legally expose without creating risk to the entire district, people who were coming into people's homes.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be difficult about that.
No,
we would continue to find the best way to meet your child's needs.
Right. Now the other thing is that I'm a stay-at-home mom because of him. However, there are other special need parents that have to work as well as dealing with that, other than just say Zoom meetings and things like that, whereas my son is extremely uncomfortable with seeing somebody on camera. Is there another way that we can somehow get the kids more involved, but at the same time alleviate some of the stress that the parents are feeling in teaching them?
Sure. So let me make a recommendation because yours is pretty specific. For those parents who have special needs child, our special ed team leaders are the other people to talk to and explain your situation and work with them to create it. Because our special ed staff would likely be more involved with the remote learning than some of our regular ed teachers. But that, without getting into specifics, my recommendation is, email me once we know what things are going on. I'll forward your request to the appropriate special ed team leader. Yes.
My name is Natalie Burt. You had said about the governor is mandating the 100% in-person learning now. But if at some point there was a case or something we decided we needed to close, you would have the option to go to the hybrid, even though I guess every district would be required to be 100% at the state level.
Right. So is that the question?
Well, the question is, you said we couldn't change if we felt the need because there was more cases, but I was wondering if the reverse was true, if the governor said, hey, everybody needs to go hybrid, but we had no cases, could we say, no, we want to continue with 100%?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the question is for our live stream audience, moving to the hybrid if we have a case or something like that, but also if things are low here and the governor says hybrid, can we move back to the in-person? So the first part of the question is, and don't get me wrong, if we have a local case, I'm not sure the hybrid even works, or not a local case in town, but if we have cases in school, I think we're talking likely shutdown versus going into the hybrid. Any decision that's made outside of the governor's decision, I have to contact the commissioner and get permission. Without doing that, I can't count those days as days of school. So what I don't want to do is say, okay, you're going to be out for 2 weeks, and the commissioner says, no, you can, with one case in the community, you can only be out for 2 days, and then, now we've lost 7 days of school. Because the Board of Education and myself, we have to certify that students attend 180 days, or in this case, this year, 177 days. Now, that's a great question, and here's what I anticipate. Southwest Connecticut has a flare-up because of the proximity to New York. The governor says, look, I'm going to recommend hybrid cases, but for you in the eastern part of the state, if you want to remain in your in-person, then you can. So I think there would be a choice in that direction. There's not necessarily the choice to do green, in-person or hybrid if his mission is to get everybody back. So I would not be surprised if there was a hybrid choice. It would be, okay, hybrid makes sense for Fairfield County, but for Windham County, Middlesex County, London County, if you want to stay in the in-person instruction, then you can. Yes?
I have a few questions. With the 177 days that the students have to meet, does that impact our last day of school?
Yes. So in the calendar that was part of the handout, and this is brand new information, Tuesday, the State Board of Education reduced the required numbers of school days to 177 to allow school districts to front-load additional professional development to prepare the schools. We decided we would jump on that, and what that does is, if you look at the calendar, it gives our teachers a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, plus the following Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to really prepare our schools with our teachers back. It allows us, in week one, we're going to kind of frame this out. It'll be a little more detailed for teachers when I email them. But our goal is to really focus on the environment, the safety of your classroom, your building, your hallways. Are we using lockers? Are we not using lockers? Where are we going to put backpacks in your room? How are we going to move the desks even further apart if you feel that needs to be done? So that's 3 days of safety, of hygiene training, of here's strategies to put a mask back on a young child. And week one is safety. Week 2, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of week 2, now we're focusing on what does instruction look like this year? What does the first 2 weeks of school look like? So we get teams together. Because, usually the first couple of weeks of school, we make it challenging, yet fun, yet welcome back. And we don't want to lose any of that. So teams of teachers will be talking on, how do we reintegrate our kids back into the environment? And so we're giving 2 weeks, basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that we are very well prepared for students. The wrong thing to do is try to cram it all into 6 days in a row and then rush the kids in. Starting after Labor Day, it gives us a whole extra week to see what's going on in Connecticut and then bring the students back. So that was the purpose of the extra days. There was another part of your question.
Yeah, so our last day of school got pushed back for
Yes.
2 days.
So the 3 days we do not need to make up, but there's one additional day that will now be added to the end of the calendar, and I'll send out a brand new calendar to families. But instead of Monday, June 14th, now the last day of school is Tuesday, June 15th.
Okay.
Barring hurricanes, snowstorms, blizzards, and any other thing that happens in 2020, 2021.
I have a few other questions as well. The plexiglass that you purchased for the elementary schools, any thought about middle school and high school?
Yeah, so I use the word plexiglass, but I shouldn't use plexiglass because it's chemicals in plexiglass. So it's plastic shields.
Yeah.
We can get more, and we will have extras that we may try out at the middle school. But I found it a little problematic as a former high school teacher and high school principal, telling high school students to surround themselves with a shield. I just wasn't sure it was going to be an effective mode of teaching. But we do have extras. We're going to try them at the middle school. We can always purchase more.
AP, I have a senior AP classes, stuff like that, still going to be happening? Are any classes going to be cut because of this?
Yeah, so we are not cohorting at the high school. We thought that students having access to their AP courses or honors level courses, family and consumer science courses, our new robotics program, our new virtual Chinese Mandarin program. We've made a lot of enhancements to our curriculum and our courses, and to me, that we're going to rely on high school students to practice good habits in the hallway. In other words, it's not a mask break when the period ends and you're scampering off to your next class. And we may create one-way hallways or something like that, but access to the courses is extremely important to us.
Okay. My last question, I think. Any thought of maybe the first couple weeks of school having half days just to kind of slowly get into the 100% back to school?
And we did discuss that about starting the year with half days, and I think now that we've pushed after Labor Day, I think that's fallen out of favor. My concern with half days, to be honest, at Memorial School first couple of days, it's going to take extra time if 200 people drop off their children. Just creating that, getting them in, it'd almost be time to get them out with the half day. And the fact that we're starting now on a Tuesday, the first week is a little shorter. For now, we're planning to keep it full days. But that's a great suggestion. Yes?
We had plans for some of the high school kids to be going to RAM for that manufacturing program.
Yep.
How is that going to be affected?
So as of now, we're still planning to do the partnership with RAM. We'll probably have 6 to 8 students, seniors, who will leave at the end of the day and do the manufacturing program at RAM. If we thought it was too dangerous mixing kids because of flare-ups, we would pull back on that. But that's a program that we've invested a little money in. We've changed our technology ed courses to prepare them for that. I hate to lose that manufacturing program at this point. Now, it's easy to pull back, but I think it's too early to pull back on it right now. Yes?
Hi, Susan DeRosa. I have a quick question too, actually. My first question is, will parents have the opportunity, once everything is all set up in the different buildings, perhaps to do a walkthrough? Or have somebody can do a video so we can see what the layout and design, flow of traffic, change, especially in the high school, because it seems like there's going to be
Okay, so I think that's a great idea. If you look at the calendar that I sent out in June, and you're looking at the calendar that you're holding, you've seen that the sneak peek of classrooms and stop in and say hello. We are not going to do all that. We're trying to keep the schools, as pure as possible. And I realize that, the way COVID spreads, though I don't claim to be an expert, it's a little less touching than it is contact, face-to-face contact with people and through breath particles, etc. I'm still uncomfortable with inviting families in. I'm afraid that even retouching the door so many times and high contact points, we're going to try to avoid that. I think it's a great idea. I'm going to Mary write this down right now. And I know some of the principals were already talking about that. Was to try to do a video to show you, okay, here is how your school looks when you come in. There's going to be a hand sanitizing station here, and your principals would send that home. But just for cautious, I think we're going to scale back we don't want it to not be welcoming to parents. But I think for safety reasons, we're going to cancel any of those events this year.
I would personally feel very comfortable doing via video.
I think a video would be highly appropriate.
And my second question, if I might ask it, is if we should have to go to the hybrid model where, or the whole distance learning again, the synchronous versus asynchronous teaching, I was just wondering about that because I noticed that obviously the teachers did a fabulous job. I love these Stanford school teachers, they're my heroes. But I was also wondering, how would we be knowing if, so I was just wondering what that would be like if we still experience some teachers doing a lot of asynchronous stuff and some teachers doing more synchronous learning or just
Sure.
their,
And the question is synchronous learning, live learning versus the sending information home or screencastify or other things like that. I think one of the things that we took away was we would like more synchronous time or more direct contact with the teacher should we go to the distance learning. And that's a plan that we're developing now. I'm not sure we would be 100% synchronous.
thank you.
Mary will be able to answer those questions. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Mary.
Just that I think we reflected on that and in this spring and learning and managing the needs of families and staff. And it was a reactive process, as I'm sure you experienced as well. But moving forward, we would look to have more consistency. I think we found at the elementary level that grade levels had consistency across a particular grade level, but not necessarily vertically. And that was true sort of all the way K-12. So we'll work with our teachers in district to establish those consistent expectations, and that would be communicated in advance. And that's work we'll do now, so that if and when that was to be a pivot, it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone. So those conversations are just beginning.
Yes.
Question. As I know right now, the incoming third grade has 25 kids in a classroom. They did not have an extra teacher.
Correct.
Is that something that's being looked at? Because if we have a 100% model, 25 is really unacceptable to try and distance.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. And, we did the best we could with the budget. We were able to grab the extra fourth grade teacher
And I'm thankful for that.
and the fifth grade teacher. Our largest class sizes will be the third grade. We're also waiting to see how many people are going to do the remote learning at the start of the school year. But I cannot promise that we would add an additional third grade teacher at
Can
this
we
point.
bump up as if kindergarten is still 80 kids? They don't need 6 teachers?
That is also a possibility. We're waiting to see numbers because, right now, with us not being in school, we're still getting kindergarten registration. Usually, by now, the kindergarten is still trickling in, so it's a hard number to pin down. What we're also anticipating is some people not registering kindergarten students who are on the age cusp saying, well, maybe we should wait one more year. But then waiting until the last minute to register their child as well. And I'm not trying to avoid your question, there's just some unknowns there.
If you offer 100%, at any point, 100% of those children can show up.
Could show up.
So that is a concern
Right, no, I understand that.
So,
Patients, if I can offer that number is higher, it's not 80 right now. So there's.
I'm just thinking of bumping up where needs are,
Yeah.
because always my value. I don't know why it's fair that you have 25 in one class and then say, oh, well, we're going to keep this classroom at 18, when that wasn't the case for my own children,
Yeah. Likewise.
especially in this kind of scenario.
I don't have an answer for that one yet.
I just asking.
Fair question.
I know many other surgeries, parents will be asking the same thing.
Okay. Yes?
You did a point earlier that you thought was pretty good, deserves a little bit more expansion.
Sure.
Getting your kids to wear masks longer during the day.
Yeah.
I'm a healthcare worker, I worked in COVID ICU for 90 days during the surge. Wearing PPE was the hardest part of the job.
Yeah.
All you wanted to do was take it off.
Right.
It was like 2 months before we went, this doesn't bother me. The kids show up on the first day of school, we're going from wearing a mask in the grocery store to wearing a mask all day at school. The teacher would just go chase the kids around.
Yeah.
Should be in some way, and that's enough to the parents and saying, did we wear a mask for our day this week?
Sure.
That's a recommendation.
No, I think that's, I mean, from someone who is experiencing it, you know, anything we can do to facilitate with families, I see Mary's writing that down for me, making sure that kids start wearing masks now, a little longer each time. When they're on Netflix, put a mask on them and give them an extra half hour of Netflix or something like that, as long as they keep the mask on, just so we build up the time. Now, also keep in mind, students are not going to need to wear the mask 6 hours straight from 8 to 2 or 8 to 3. I fully anticipate, you know, teachers taking them outside, you know, and I don't have the January answer yet, but at least the September, October answer is outside, take off the masks, come back in, recess time, lunchtime without masks. So, you know, we're going to break it up as much as possible. But still, they're going to feel like they have it on all day long, even if it just comes off for 10, 15 minutes.
Adults should,
Yep.
all you want to do is take it off. One last point to make, the PPE worked.
Yep.
Anybody who would say the masks don't work, not one of us got COVID.
Yeah.
The entire day staring at people that extremely high power levels.
No, and I appreciate that news, and I think, you know, Connecticut seems, you know, the mask culture is not difficult to push in Connecticut. I was watching that Utah meeting where the parents were screaming about wearing masks, and, you know, nobody in here is shouting and screaming about wearing masks. So I think Connecticut, we've gotten over that hurdle that people understand the mask. But like I said, it's just not an option for a family to come in and say, we're not going to wear a mask. Now, just so you know, if your child comes home and says, hey, there's a kid in my class without a mask, there are provisions in the state of Connecticut plan for certain children with certain medical conditions. They likely will not be in a mask. But I don't anticipate that to be more than, you know, a handful of children. Yes?
Since we're talking about masks, will there be any recommendations about the minimum requirements for what equals a mask?
Sure.
Like no vent and, you know, multiple layers, things like that. Will anything like that be sent out to parents because we're furnishing masks? Yeah.
And we will provide masks. So if it's a mask that, you know, comes in and the kid cut out their mouth because they were needed to breathe, we are providing masks to students who don't have masks when the mask is not appropriate. You know, if the kids want to do the, you know, the neck cover and the neck things, and or if a parent gives them a heavy-duty mask or a painter's mask or something, you know, I mean, my wife made this mask. It's one of my favorites. It matches my shirt. I fully anticipate that you're going to see cheetah masks and lion masks and bell ringer masks, and, you know, I think it will become a fashion statement. But yes, making sure that, you know, the masks are appropriate will be one of our responsibilities.
I guess one of my big concerns would be the ones that have the vent on them because they allow your breath to escape. So it's only protecting.
I'm going to ask our medical expert in the audience.
Surgical masks, like the ones all of us are wearing, even cloth masks, are not designed to prevent 100% of the droplets.
So I get that.
It's very important to realize that we're not dealing with N95 masks.
Right.
N95 masks are called N95 together on that type, so I can't really say. But I would say probably if we all need the same kind of thought process, that's probably.
We'll do some research on it. Question, yes?
You had mentioned that the high school still could have their electives. Is that going to hold true for the middle school with language and math class?
Yes. So we are cohorting grades 6, 7, and 8. So, ideally we would have 6, 7, and 8 moving around so they're not with the same students all day long. But in this year, we're kind of going back to that group moving through. They will still get the math class they belong in, the world language they've selected. They'll still have access to art and music class as well.
Okay, so those specialty classes, they won't be with their cohorts?
They will be with cohort for the majority of the day.
Okay.
But they will still get, we've grouped them by the language and the math were the two main choices that they have that kind of identify where they move. So students will be together who selected the same math and the same language, for the most part. Because I don't want to deny them the math they wanted and whether they wanted French or Spanish, so we're able to accommodate that, but that's basically how they group for the day.
Okay.
Yes?
I have two children, one going into first and another going into fourth. And we're choosing to distance learn them because either they're high risk or we have family members that are high risk. Especially for our first grader, how do we ensure that they're going to have the bond and the connection with the teacher that they're going to be assigned to should they return to school at some point?
So at this point, what we're likely going to do is, and like I said earlier, I can't ask that teacher who has two kids distance learning to also be responsible for their education. But I think what we would ask them to do is when they're emailing information home to all families, include the families so they know what's going on in the classroom. If they're doing, tomorrow is crazy pajama day, then, at home let the kid do crazy pajama day. If it's possible to connect them in some Google Meet time so they can meet some of their classmates or participate in something, then we would do that as well.
Okay. And my second question is, for my child that's going into center school this coming year, if they elect to participate in band in their distance learning, how would that work? Would they still be able to participate, or are they out of luck?
So band and chorus are two of the courses that we're looking at because one of the more dangerous, I don't want to be dangerous, but one of the more activities that causes transmission is singing and certain types of band instrument playing. I think like clarinet and trumpet are much more riskier than drums. So we're working on a couple of things for that. So we're not sure how chorus will work. We may not start chorus at the start of the school year. The general music class will be activities that are clearly safe because they can do things in general music that don't require singing and other things that might be dangerous. As far as the beginning band program, fourth grade and then the fifth grade, we may hold off the full band meeting together and create lessons that would just be clarinets spaced out, 12 feet. I think there's guidelines that we just got that says 12 feet between players. Unless you're a trombone, you need 20 feet or something like that. We'll create, an appropriate environment for that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And if you drive down, Main Street and you hear some trombone players from the gazebo, that may be one of the solutions.
Right.
Yes?
So another question. For those that we decided to keep our children at home and do the parallel distance learning, is it possible to say, keep the child maybe on a Google Meet a specific time of the day, so that way, like she said, they can bond with the teacher and the class, should we decide to put them back into the class later in the year?
Yeah, and that I can't guarantee. Because of FERPA and other child's privacy rights, I can't necessarily broadcast what's going on in a classroom. Now, ideally, it would just be focused on the teacher, but then I'm asking the teacher to stand in one place and conduct the room. So while I can promise informal Google Meets, I can't promise instruction through Google Meet. Yes?
Will all classrooms have AC?
We are currently working on all classes having air conditioning and doing it appropriately. Maybe it's air conditioning with the windows open and the doors open, just so, you know, we're not recirculating bad air and things like that. But we are working on putting AC in all of the classrooms.
And like, what are your thoughts on, my daughter lasted 27 minutes. She's a center school kid. I'm worried about the air conditioning. She lost 27 minutes with a mask on. That's it. 27 minutes the first time, 47 minutes the second time. I'm severely concerned about her ability to wear a mask in especially a hot environment. So I just want to maybe talk to the principal about what that AC, like what that air conditioning will look like specifically at center school.
That would be, that's an appropriate course, and see if you can build up her tolerance to the mask. I understand it's difficult, and I'm not trying to be flippant on the masks.
No, I'm sure, I found another one. So I have a question about, because the next step is if that's not adequate for her due to her asthma, right? Like I can't get her to wear that mask long enough, then I have to pull her, and she has to be at home. She'll do the parallel learning track. I'm still very confused about what that looks like.
Sure, and you know, we'll have more details as the summer goes on. You can visit the site right now. The link is live in the.
So you're saying, okay, so I'm going to push a little bit on the learning hub. I know Irene Parisi specifically stated that it shouldn't be used as the main curriculum for any student.
Correct.
So that, I'm wondering what East Hampton is doing, not what the learning hub is going to be about. They can access that as resources, but it's not supposed to be a main curriculum.
Correct, and I like I said earlier, we're still developing what that looks like. I think if you were here earlier, I said students would have access to the Chromebook. They would be able to do iReady instruction. Our reading specialists, math specialists, and others would provide materials and suggestions to keep them up to date with what we're doing. The math workbook, etc., would be available. Obviously, math and reading are the most important for the kids to catch on, and I would recommend the remote learning hub for extra social studies, extra science, extra reading, etc. But you have to give us a little time to really hone in on, you know, what the remote learning track is going to look like. We don't have all the answers to that.
And I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
If a family decides to do the remote learning hub, and they have an IEP, will that IEP be supported through the school and the learning hub?
So any student with an IEP would be supported. You know, our team leaders, special ed team leaders at the grade level would reach out and make sure that, you know, we're able to do everything that the best we can through remote learning.
Okay,
Yeah, please.
so for those of you who don't know me, Mary Clark. For those of you who don't know me personally, Mary Clark, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Amy, I'll respond to that, and it kind of dovetails on the remote learning. So, having reviewed all of Irene's material, it's definitely not sufficient independently, and we recognize that. So we're in the process of evaluating how to develop weekly plans for remote learning. The reason I'm hesitant on giving a concrete answer is because we haven't finished that project. So I wouldn't want to commit to something we can't deliver later, and because that looks different at different grade levels developmentally. So if we're talking about Memorial and Center, that's sort of one solution. Middle and high school are different. So we just need a little more time to finalize that. Likewise, for IEP services, we will evaluate that as we have more information about who is actually, we recognize there's sort of two competing needs. You need more information from us to decide. We need information in order to plan. Our district is not designed to run schools in person and remotely at the same time currently, but we're going to build that. So we're going to take the immediate survey responses that we're getting, assess what the trends are, because they're not a commitment. That will help us to start to plan more, and from there, look at more concrete dates for when we're going to need information. IEP services are our responsibility. How exactly we will deliver those, we're going to have to define as we get commitment from families. We may have to reallocate staff. We may have to say, We have 6 special educators at the middle school. We need 1 to deliver these services remotely. We just don't have those answers yet, but obviously a child's growth is our first priority, regardless of what their learner profile is and where their setting is. We may come into problems we've not had to solve before, and we will work together to problem solve, whether it's a specific learner's profile that demands in the home, if it's a need in our staffing models in the schools. We have some fixed things that we know, the number of people we have to facilitate teaching and learning is one of those very fixed things. So we're gonna have to look at our caseloads for every professional and reevaluate as we have more information. They are both high priorities. Probably our highest priorities right now are how to support remote learning for families who need it. We recognize if you're in that spot, it's not where you want to be. We know that. And so we have to develop that piece in what is a relatively short period of time, and we will, and we'll pace that out over the years so it's responsive to what's really happening. We can't design the whole thing now because we don't know what November looks like. And then we will also do that work on EP services. So that's where we're at. Questions based on that? But we'll continue, I think, to try, our goal is also to be highly transparent with you as I'm being right now. So we will continue to update you. And as we have more information so that you can make good decisions for your child and your family. I am also a parent in our district of a rising 1st and 4th grader, so I share those decisions with you. We will be transparent about that. And if you feel like you're not getting the information quick enough, contact us. We'll give you the update, but our goal for everyone listening at home too, because I know there's been a lot of conversation about that, is not to keep information from anyone or to limit your ability to contact us. So reach out, partner with us. It's an unprecedented year ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does this plan result in any contact with schools that have already been going for a couple months, either in the United States or other countries? We learned a lot when we learned in Connecticut, we were 3 months ago. We're telling Texas, Houston, what we learned, and they're getting better outcomes. So is there any contact with people that have been going to school for a couple months?
Sure, so this plan is not only based on Connecticut, but we based it on what California was doing, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Right now, there's not a lot of schools in the United States that are in. So some of the research was based on some of the European schools. The European schools found that once they opened, some of the families on remote learning came back in the first month. Most of them came back. But it's hard to compare what's going on in Europe necessarily with the United States. We're on a different trajectory with the virus right now. Obviously, if we were in the situation that Florida is in, I wouldn't be having this meeting because I don't know what I would do right now. I think we'd be talking, we're going to be in distance learning. And I think our governor has made good choices along the way. And, a lot of us scratched our head at, we were out quickly and then kept anticipating coming back, and, we never did. It looks like a great decision now based on, the fact that our rates are low. So there's, we don't have a lot of precedence on what to do. I think the other states are saying, if we want to be where Connecticut and New York are, we've got to do what they did basically, and that was restrict outdoor dining and indoor dining and movies and bowling and all that stuff. And commit to the mask. So there's not a lot of models for us to look at and say, hey, we're doing what this school district did because it really worked.
If I can add to that, Paul, I think the scope of the United States makes that transference from European countries, as Paul said, a little bit of a challenge, but there's absolutely elements of this plan that are reflected in what has been done internationally to reopen schools, from the screens to the mask, outside time, and the social distancing are the ones that come to mind right away. We did participate this spring in webinars where international educators from around the world were sharing their experiences. There's a lot of American schools abroad that have been pushing information back to state departments of ed. So there's elements of Connecticut's plan that are informed by that as well. So I appreciate that. I think we are in such a situation where anytime we can glean from another's what worked and conversely what didn't.
Question?
What role would you play in any decisions to close the school if someone tests positive? Is the school community involved in the decision to close, or is it strictly a health department decision?
So, you know, the health department is not necessarily going to shut us down. But they're going to make strong recommendations. And for the Board of Education, myself, not to make a decision based on what the local health director is advising, probably would not be prudent. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go into a quick shutdown. If, you know, there's 2 more cases in the community of East Hampton, I think our big concern is what do we do if there's cases in the school? Can we say, well, they came from the outside and they didn't have much contact in? Or do we see a lot of people in the school with symptoms? I mean, that's the type of decision-making process that would be done. And I think that the local health director would say, Paul, I'm advising you to close for 2 weeks. If that is a statement made to me by the local health director, then we would likely close for 2 weeks. Doesn't mean that that's the first line. The first line of defense isn't to shut down for 2 weeks. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
It's the health department recommendation, not.
Yeah, I think, you know, the expectation from the state is, you know, the state is going to make, if there's a statewide decision, we're all going to know that on the morning news. If there's pockets of problems, then superintendents all around the state will be relying on what their local health director says. Yes?
My name is Yadira Raza, and I want to ask you, you just said we will go into a shutdown. In that event, you mean the kids would go into remote learning, correct?
They would go into our distance learning plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, our goal will be to have teachers ready to deliver a couple of weeks of distance learning, throughout the year. So, you know, if we do need to go into distance learning, I don't want it to just be lost time and the kids sitting home with nothing for 2 weeks, or even 2 or 3 days. We'd like to keep a continuity of instruction going on as much as
So
possible.
automatically would be, the first day would be distance learning, not like a snow day that.
Yeah, no, so my expectation is if we would, say we shut down for 5 days.
Yeah.
You know, at noon, I'm telling the principals, everybody goes home, make sure they have their Chromebooks and everything, because starting tomorrow, it's distance learning for 5 days.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Which I'll just add as an example, just when we think about all that planning of the infrastructure we're building, so that we're anticipating that, you know, at any time, we can pivot into one of those models, which is different than what happened this year. We pivoted really quickly, but we didn't do it overnight. We did it over a weekend. So we're still going to have to, you know, work with the team to make sure that everybody's ready for that, and we will. That's what we're doing.
In the remote learning, have you guys considered having more like virtual classes to the kids? Because last year it was more like sending homeworks and projects and things like that. What about like having like a virtual class that the kids is in the gets up at 7 in the class for math or whatever, and he's getting the class.
For middle school and high school, there's a program that we use for certain students that are homebound for medical reasons or others. It's called Odysseyware. That literally is a virtual class that students can participate in. But I think as Mary explained, right now we're not prepared with the amount of staff that we have to, you know, do in-person instruction and at the same time provide virtual instruction to a number of students.
No, this would be like when you go into the remote learning, that the kids are not going to be in the classroom,
right,
or coming to school, have the virtual classes. The reason why I'm saying is my brother in Colombia, he's a teacher, and that's what the school did. And each teacher would say, they would have classes like 9 o'clock, math. The teacher from math would have, and they interact with him and answer questions and whatever, and then the other teacher comes in and teach the other class, and they go into different internet classrooms.
Yes, and that's one of our plans, to try to create more live learning for students if we go into distance learning.
Yeah, because I think that would be better for the kids to learn, because not everybody perform as well in self-learning or self-teaching or following instructions. That's why it's so important to have the school open, because of the kids need that interaction with the teacher.
Sure. No, we both agree with that. Yes?
It hasn't come up, but is there any discussion at the local level or state level about testing for COVID with either teachers or students?
Yeah, it's fascinating. In the plans, for one reason or another, schools are not to do COVID testing in the state plan. So we're not authorized to have our nurses do COVID testing. It'd be nice if that would change and it was something that you could find out in 10, 20 minutes. I know they're trying to develop those quick tests, but right now schools cannot be used as a testing site.
So if anyone contracts, it's going to be very late in the game, or they have to get their own test. I mean, that's what's the discussion about?
So, for example, if you in the plans it talks about, if you have a fever of 100, you send to the nurse's office, your fever is 101.2. The nurse is going to send your child home with a note saying, depending on a number of situations, the child can come back 24 hours after the fever subsides, or you've got to have a clear COVID test that you bring back, or a note from a doctor saying your child is clear to come back. And we would expect the same with staff as well. Now, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be waiting 2 weeks for testing. I know some parts of the United States are waiting 2 weeks. I think Connecticut's a little faster, though I don't know. My mother recently had surgery and was able to get the test results in a day before she was scheduled to go in. So somewhere between a day and 2 weeks, I think, depending on I see a head shake no. It's longer than 2 weeks.
Closer to the 2 weeks than sooner.
Yeah.
I think that's depends. I had a test because I had a procedure, and it was 2-3 days. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
My son had surgery on Tuesday.
You answered the question, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Why would testing for the virus with a negative result not be a requirement to re-enter into the schools be feasible?
I think just because of the situation of, and ideally we would be able to do a lot more tests. I know one of the things on the news is we're just not testing enough. Even Connecticut, we'd like to test more. I think just because of the availability and the time right now. But that was not one of the requirements of the Connecticut plan. I'd be afraid without our local health authority to tell everyone can't come back to school without a clean test at this point.
Thank you.
It may come to that in the future when tests are able to be done rapidly. Yes?
Have the school considered testing the temperature of the students when they come into the school or not?
Yeah, a number of things that were problematic with that, in that lining students up, our elementary school is 600 students, doing a temperature check of each one would be a real timely process. And so what we're doing is we're kind of doing what we're calling a semi-active screening. So what we're going to be doing is asking our teachers, as they greet their kids in the morning, anybody that's not feeling well, ask kids, who don't look well or their head's on the desk, ask them, are you feeling okay? I think our teachers are going to be that front line, and then sending them down to the nurse's office. We are going to have an extra nurse at the Memorial School who will kind of do that, immediate screening of kids that don't look well or are sent down or don't feel well. But we are not prepared to do temperature checks for everybody that walks through the door.
And what about considering giving a temperature, a thermometer to the teachers? And each teacher would have only 20 tests to do that before the classes start.
Yeah, that's a violation it's a HIPAA violation for me to have teachers who are not trained to have medical information about their students. We don't want to create that sense of panic. Everybody's in the classroom, one kid has a fever, and the thing beeps, and we send that kid out, and now every other kid is concerned necessarily. Keep in mind, especially with a young kid, a fever does not necessarily indicate COVID. So we're trying not to rush into a panic situation and or create panic.
Okay.
Yes.
When I go to work every day, I have to take my own temperature, report it through an email system. I'm not saying that every parent reporting it is feasible, but why don't we just say?
And we are looking into that through Parent Square, asking parents, to check off boxes. My child doesn't have a fever. My child's okay today, etc. Problem is, a lot of our middle school and high school kids get up before they, go to school before their parents even wake up. And if I have a great 80% return rate, what do I do with the 20% that didn't respond? Am I taking somebody offline just to call or check out those kids? But we are looking at something like that.
I think it's just behavior for both, saying, please take your kid's temperature.
Right.
Just like masks.
Well, and I think that, if you look at page 4, page 9, page 8, that's what we're asking families to do. Please screen your children before you send them to school. If you want us to stay open, and I think everybody wants to get schools back open, but as soon as we all don't work as a team, that's going to cause our schools to close. And I'm not passing the responsibility off of the school, but once we're open, staying open is going to be everybody's responsibility.
Yes? Are there any plans to disinfect the desks at the middle school and high school level in between classes?
So the middle school students will not be moving.
Okay.
So they'll mainly be at their same desk for the day. We're going to come up with a way to quickly wipe down desks, or hand the students a wipe, or give them a Purell on the way in or on the way out. But we'll make sure that and we're obviously concerned about science equipment. If their students are doing a lab and we have to share the equipment, all that's going to be cleaned in between. Yes.
So the middle school kids are not going to be going class to class, they're going to stay in the same one all day long?
We're trying to keep the middle school students as a cohort in the classroom together as much as possible.
So are they going to have like gym and?
Yes, so similar to what we would do with the elementary schools, the teachers are free to bring them outside. PE teachers will bring them outside. If they need a mask break, the teacher can have them stand up, bring them all outside for a little while. They can do a lesson outside. So even though they're in the same classroom, they're not going to be sitting at a desk for 7.5 hours. Middle school kids also will not eat in their classroom.
So they get to eat in the cafeteria or outside?
Yeah, we're going to find, they won't all be in the cafeteria. We're going to use a couple different locations. I think they've got 3 or 4 locations, and outside for the middle school students.
So they're going to have the same teacher, or you're going to have like the science teacher come?
No, the teachers will move.
Okay.
So the math teacher will come in and then move down the hall to his next math class. The foreign language teacher will come in. So we're moving the teachers around more than we are moving the students.
And are they going to have like soccer or baseball, whatever their activities like?
Yep, so we're waiting for the CIAC guidelines. All middle school sports and high school sports are run by the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference. And they, as a group, will decide if there's sports or what the rules are for that.
Oh, so we'll know that more.
Yep, we just need time. CIAC has not come up with guidelines for sports yet. There was some talk, and I think Rhode Island has done this. They're moving football to the spring and baseball to the fall because there's less contact. Cross country's okay, but soccer and volleyball are kind of mid-risk. Football and wrestling, or wrestling's more of a winter sport, that's a high risk. So some sports may be allowed, others may be curtailed or moved to a different season. But we're waiting that guidance. Yes?
So it seems like as far as K through 8 goes, students are all going to be cohorted. But with the high school, it seems like there's going to be more movement, more flow of traffic, changing of classrooms. It seems like that's
the high school is more difficult to cope
with. A lot more
with.
cleaning needs to be done, a lot more disinfecting needs
Yep.
to be done throughout the changing classes, bathrooms, et cetera.
Yeah, so we fully anticipate, the doors being open, so kids aren't opening the door and coming into the classroom. The doors are open, no one has to push open a door or pull open a door in between classes. Even some of our bathrooms, we've taken down blowers, they're gonna use all paper. But there will be, we're gonna come up with a format to just clean off desks quickly in between and mandatory supplies that are necessary for classroom. But, we weighed the cohort option, but the students' interests are right away from the high school. They're scheduled based on, are you in band or not in band? Do you take chorus or not take chorus? Which language do you want? Which level of science, English? And then junior, senior year, there's AP options and different electives. It's just too hard to cohort without severely limiting the amount of choices for the high school students. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the Connecticut plan, the Connecticut plan really treats K-8 and high school differently. And I think partially it's also of the personal accountability we can ask of a high school student is different than a fourth grader. So it's developmentally considered. High schools cohorted where we stay in one place all day really cease to be high schools too. I think that was part of the issue. And our high school students are trying to prepare for their next level of education. So if they're not able to access those courses, it really, what do we do? So this is sort of the issue. So we can hold them more accountable. It gives us an environment, a physical environment to target in terms of what you're describing as cleaning schedules. We'll be cleaning more everywhere, but particularly where kids are moving, the hand sanitizer being available to the students, and we can expect that if we say this is what you need to do, that there's going to be a fair consistency with reminders for all of us who know how that works. But K-8, it's really strongly encouraged that we keep kids as grouped as possible, cohorted as possible for their own safety. And so K-5, that's even more contained, although they're used to that mostly. That's the only, if you think about our elementary students, their classroom is their home. And they only leave for specials and lunch. So that's gonna come to them. And we'll try and get them outside as much as possible. Many school classrooms in Memorial open right to the outside. When we get to the middle, I think that's gonna see the biggest differences initially. And our rising sixth graders won't have seen it any differently. But we are being conservative in the middle school. But with the understanding that if the public health numbers continue to support reducing restrictions, that we will. So they'll start pretty much cohorted with their IEP services, math level, and world language choices considered. And then they will leave their classroom for their specials, because I was a middle school teacher for a long time, and getting them some movement we felt was critical. Giving them a little bit of flexibility with lunch too, for their social needs. But what we know about that age learner too is that we can start conservatively and relax if the public health picture would suggest that's appropriate. It's harder to give freedom and take back. Both from a child development perspective, if we said, oh, you can move around as much as you want, and then that wasn't the right choice, it's harder to pull back at that point. So we really felt it was important to start, and many classroom teachers would tell you they do this anyway. You start with the most routine and structure and relax as you see fit. And so in this case, what would deem it fit is public health. So just wanted to add a little bit to that.
Yes?
What is the plan for recess? Will they be using playscapes? Whoa.
We haven't committed to exact use of playscapes. I see Brandy in the audience. Building committee is still talking about playscapes and what recess looks like.
Different zones at least.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned asking parents who can drive to drive their students to eliminate crowding on buses.
Yes.
Is there any plan to stagger arrivals, to alleviate that line out the door around the corner?
Sure. So that's also, building committee is talking about that. Maybe the buses drop off here, and please don't drop off your children before, or this, or if your last name is this, come between this time. You will get explicit instructions from your school. Now, understand that, last Thursday, July 9th is the first time I publicly released these plans. And I applaud our building committees and district opening committee because You know, a lot of towns are still working on their plans. We took a much more aggressive approach. And we've presented these plans without the building committees right now having all the answers. But over the course of the summer, you'll get exact, you know, building specific. Here's what lunch is going to look like. Here's what drop-off looks like. Here's what recess looks like. So they just need a little bit of time to do this because nobody has held this plan for more than a week, except for me.
Paul, if I may.
Yeah, please.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is safety is number one. And so in supporting Andy, the principal of Memorial, like he understands that first we have to safely get them in the building, and then at all costs we have to safely dismiss them to the right people at the end of the day. So that's a huge priority for Memorial. But the thing I'd like to add to that is that we are also working very closely with Chris Sullivan at Center School because we share hours and we share transportation. So please know that it's not just we're taking care of Memorial, we also have to take care of other buildings, and we're working very closely with centers so that there's a process that works for families with students in both buildings for safe drop-off and arrival and safe pick-up and dismissal.
Yes.
Forgive me. First, I want to say thank you for setting out this plan so early, and it's very thorough, and it's appreciated, the transparency. Second, I was listening to a lot of your discussion while I was en route here, and I heard that you talk about like some of the classrooms, the smaller classrooms at Memorial School, how they wouldn't have like the reading nook and that. Given like a classroom like that, where I have an incoming, where I have a first grader coming into the school, I know that currently we're planning to do the remote learning. But should we decide to track her back into the school, what would the tables look like? Currently, they would have like 4 or 5 kids surrounded around a table. I know you have the plastic thing. Would it just be 2 kids to a table, 3 kids to a table? What would that look like?
It's specific to each room,
Okay.
and I don't have all the answers to that yet. But we've prided ourselves in doing math workshop and reader workshop, where readers writers workshop with a couple of kids or 1 or 2 kids, conference with a teacher at not the teacher desk but this semi-round desk. It breaks our heart that we're moving that things like that just out of the room for now, just to create as much space as possible. The recommendation of the state was put all desks in the room and have them all facing the same way. If you're a Memorial parent, it's hard pressed to even find one room with desks.
Right.
Education has moved well beyond desks at the elementary level over the last 10 years. So we kind of chuckled when they said, oh, the desks facing the same way. It's like, that's how I went to school, and it stopped soon thereafter. So we're going to create the most appropriate environment. It depends on the size of the table. If it's appropriate for 2, if we need to get a little more furniture, we'll get more furniture. What I can't do now is go and buy 600 desks and put them in the room. So what we've done is we've got the shield so we can create that extra layer of protection. So if there's a couple kids sharing a table or 3 kids at a table. But one of our parents suggested a video. When you see the video of what the classroom looks like, I hope that you know that it's been designed for safety. That last week of professional development, we're going to do something that we call classroom inspections. So we're going to bring everybody through, a team of teachers through, myself, Mary, facilities, and let teachers say, here's how my room is going to look when kids are in it, and here's what I still need, Paul. Or have us look and say, you know what, we're going to need to get you an extra table or things like that. So that's all part of our getting the teachers back in, giving them enough time to really plan out their room. Yes?
I'm just curious because I know the level of importance for high school freshman orientation, but any of the other ages that are entering brand new buildings and anything in the works that can be done for them? I have kindergarten, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, typically we have a kindergarten orientation, and that was on the calendar. We've taken it off for now because we just don't know what it's going to look like. It may be a Google Meet with your teacher. We used to do a kindergarten meet and greet. There was a bus ride, so the kindergartners could ride the bus. go and see their teacher in the classroom. You know, we're just playing it very, very cautious. So, you know, the calendar that I sent out last week of school, and all these back to school events, open house nights, we're just taking all of those off the calendar for right now. We're still keeping the traditional freshman orientation, the middle school's doing an ice cream social. There probably will be some sort of virtual or non-virtual kindergarten. Probably won't be the bus ride, but it could be out front where they get to meet their teacher. We're still working on details on that.
I just want to add to that because I really relate to that question as a parent, and I know, especially for a kindergartner, that advanced look is something that can help eliminate some anxious feelings as we start school. But if we can't, you know, give that physical visit, which is looking challenging at this time, I think one of the things I would reassure you is that I know particularly our K team and our 4th grade team, another major transition for younger learners, they very much anticipate the needs of their learners, and we would give them the flexibility in the opening of the year to really spend time on that orientation once school does start. So every careful thought would be given to what the kids would be feeling coming in and how we can best, especially masks and all of this, and this is something, you know, I'm personally researching a lot right now, so that our students feel at ease and reassured by the adults that they're with. It's part of why the State Board of Ed giving us that extra time was so critical, so that they normally do a beautiful job of that anyway, but they just have additional things to consider. And I have every faith saying that it will help those students on that first day feel excited and happy and connected, even in these challenging times. So we'll give them extra time in their teaching calendars to really spend time with the kids, and even our secondary learners, social, emotional well-being, and really starting with just hello, welcome back. I mean, we've all been through quite an event, and they share a lot of our feelings about what does this all mean. So I just wanted to add that extra reassurance.
Yes.
For this past year, I know like our SBACs got canceled, the AP classes, they took their exams at home, the kids did at home. Is the state already prepared to do stuff like that for this coming school year?
The state has not made any commitment to standardized testing. The College Board at this point has added extra days for the SAT for the juniors who didn't get to take them, but we don't have the exact formats yet. So the state, we're still awaiting some information on the state. Mr. Gerder, was that a mask adjustment or a hand raise?
Both.
Okay.
So we just found out earlier this week for high school students, the students that were juniors last year, and the College Board is offering an SAT opportunity in school on October 14th. So all of our current seniors, the class of 2021, will have the opportunity to take the SAT on Wednesday. Is it Wednesday, so the 14th of October? And the 11th graders will take the PSAT and MSQT test on that day. And then the current 9th and 10th graders will take the PSAT at a date later in the school year. They're splitting it up into 2 different days so they can get everybody that opportunity. That is obviously with the premise that we're back in school and things are working throughout in October and in March. So there's plans for that, and hopefully it'll work out.
So you can see there's still a lot of moving parts to everything. You know, everything, it's, you know, I wake up in the morning and I say, okay, what's going to change today, or what additional announcement are we going to get? Because it truly is just, you know, as the virus goes, so does the information and the plan. Yeah.
So that just brings to question number 2 is...
Sure, sorry.
No, that's okay. You know, we have to be flexible with this. That's our reality that we're in. Then the students, our kids' curriculum has to be flexible too. So what we would expect maybe a child to be able to go through in a normal year would look one way. There's no normalcy anymore. And that's our flexibility that we have to adjust to. I'm expecting my daughter's curriculum to look different by the time we end June, just because of how life is changing. I mean, is that a good assumption we should kind of just have in the back of our heads?
Well, you know, everything is different. You know, how you go into a restaurant, how you go to a supermarket is different. So I think people have to understand that schools are going to be different. In the best case scenario, we're still offering AP courses, we're still offering all the electives. Our elementary curriculum doesn't necessarily change, but our ability to deliver it to the extent that we all would like to deliver it could very well be impacted. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say, don't expect a high-quality education. We're going to work with our teachers, and I know our teachers expect that, hey, whoever's in my class, I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to do what is most appropriate. Now, we are building in, social, emotional awareness because we're concerned about some of our kids coming back. We want to make sure they're okay, and, there's going to be a lot of questions and concerns, and, just getting them through the early days of wearing a mask. Mary, I don't know if you want to add to this, but our expectation isn't, we're not lowering our standards in any way. We just may be impacted by a surge, or we may be impacted for the better by everybody has a vaccine by January 1, and masks are off, and we're just living the grand life again.
Joanna, the word I would use is responsive. I think we have to be flexible so that we can be responsive in schools and as parents. That we are making plans based on what we know today. We're making the best choices we can based on that. As we look to start the school year, we're going to have to focus on getting students at all ages comfortable being on site, comfortable with their teachers, back into new routines. A lot is going to look different to them. That's got to be step one. Then understanding where they are. What was their personal experience? Our students are going to come back to us with very different experiences. Some were home with a primary caregiver the whole time. Some were not. Some were in daycare facilities full time. Some maybe got separated for long periods of time from primary caregivers. So a whole host of new learning we have to do with our students. And then we look at where are they academically. Because I think the other word that I use as my anchor besides responsive is balance. So that we know whenever young people at any stage in their development go through major change, as they all have, that structures and routine can be very supportive and bring them a sense of safety and predictability in uncertain times. So I think that their school life is that opportunity, even though it's modified. So we'll look to balance the curriculum and the demands of curriculum with where each learner is and what we see as trends across as well. So it's going to be a balancing act, and therefore we need to be responsive.
So as we wrap up today, please check your Parent Square email. Last week's news was, here's our plan. This week's news is, we've pushed school back to start after Labor Day. I don't know what next week's news is yet, but as soon as we find out things, I promise we will gladly share it with you. You are also welcome to call me directly, 860-365-4000. It's actually easier if you call me rather than write down 20 questions, and rather than me typing answers furiously to each of those 20 questions, I can answer them a little quicker over the phone. So please don't be shy about calling me. And keep your eye out, like I said, for information directly from your school and directly from us. We're going to make sure that everybody has the information. I feel like, if anything, and like I said, I applaud our building committees who are already meeting, and our district opening committee that has already met, that, if it looks like we don't have all the answers yet, it's because we put our plan out and invited you in very early to get input and suggestions and to let you know what's going on. But this is a living, breathing document, and it's the start of what we're doing. It certainly helps our buildings that before this far ahead of time before school, that we're doing the work now. We're not in the planning stage. We are in the reopening stage of this. So a lot of changes to come. Please don't hesitate to have all of your questions answered. We will answer them. If you look at the calendar, there's another parent meeting that we will live stream on August, I think it's 28th. Did I give out the right date? August 28th. We'll start that one at 9 a.m. By then, we'll have a pretty good sense of, here's the situation. We won't say if. We'll say, here's how we're reopening. Let's get your questions, and we'll be able to be very responsive to you at that point. So thank you all for coming. If you do have additional questions, please come and ask me. We got about 2 hours of information in here, and you're a great audience for staying. And I hope the sun is about to come out now, and you can enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very much.